Good morning and welcome back to the CDS photo reviews. This week we fought Ellzawn. Let's compare the champions that Ellzawn has versus the champions that I have. So Ellzawn has Zoe, Teemo, Victor, Vi, Kayn, Hecarim, Caitlyn, Aurelion Sol, Maokai, and Ivia. Notably, they've got 3 PNZ champions. They've actually got 4 with the Teemo, but the Teemo is sort of split, right, between Battle City and PNZ. And then they've got like these 5 champions that aren't particularly like good or synergistic, like Kayn, Maokai, Nivea, Asol, Hecarim. Like they will struggle to create decks. Is what I thought back in week 1. This is when I made this thing, if you forgot where that came from. But I expected them to bring Maokai, Nivea, Zoe, Victor, and Teemo plus X, something random. So these are what they brought in weeks 1 to 4. So they brought Maokai, Nivea, and Zoe, Victor every single week in week 1 to 4. And then they also brought Teemo plus a different champion. So they brought Teemo Hecarim, which was like an aggro deck. They brought Teemo Asol, which was like a control pile. They brought Teemo Caitlyn, which was traps, right? They bought a bunch of things with Teemo, but they've always brought Maokai and Nivea, which is just a Nivea. Like Maokai is just there for SI region. And Zoe Victor, which is what you think of Zoe Victor. It's a, it's a control deck that tries to level a champion and then also runs cat, right? The other options I could have seen them bring if they did want to change it this week was something like Kayn PNZ, which I don't think is awful. I think you can build a Kayn PNZ list that works pretty decently. I know Donut was messing around with like a Varus PNZ list that was also running stuff like Victor and Vi. But I think Kayn PNZ isn't bad, and I think you could definitely make that work. And obviously, they do have like Hecarim, Maokai, and Asol. I think you can build a pretty okay Watermai pile with those regions. You've also got Zoe if you really wanted. Like, you can build Watermai piles and it'll probably be pretty decent. But expecting Maokai, Nivea, and Zoe Victor, I wanted 3 decks that absolutely just like demolish control. So I went with Red Gwen, which is just Gwen Darius. I went with Pantheon Varus, and I went with Tree. And it'll be Runeterra, and I'll explain more about that later. But let's go over the deck lists that were brought. Or that we've been talking about, these last 5 or so. Red Gwen. So this is the build of Red Gwen. Remember that CDS is in Eternal, so you don't have to worry about stuff like Ruined Reckoner being rotated. And I think this is a pretty understandable Red Gwen list, right? I've got a bunch of 1-drops and trying to beat these control lists by going like a little bit early with more early aggression. Without Katarina, I've got a few things to replace that Katarina slot. So I've got 1 Ballista to have at 3-drop, just in case I feel like I need to do a 1, 2, 3. And I've also got Shunpo to replace Katarina's rally aspect. Now, I always hated the Opulent Foyer and Shunpo and Katarina deck. I always called that deck Green Katarina, and I thought it was like a travesty to Red Gwen. Like, Red Gwen's I think it is my favorite deck of all time at this point. And, like, I staunchly dislike the way Green Katarina was built, but I can't, like, deny that if I want to, like, build this as an anti-control list, right, like, having that 1 Shunpo and the 2 Opulent Foyer is probably more necessary. We're also down on Harrowing. This is because their Anivia list ran 2 Ruinations, and Harrowing wasn't going to be a reliable win condition against those sorts of decks. I'd rather have early stuff more often. Similarly with Eternal Dances, I felt like I just wanted to be more aggressive early on. While Eternal Dances isn't bad, it's not going to fuck me up. I've also got like these 3 Dariuses, right? And 5 6-drops is a lot more than 4 6-drops. I will still feel awkward because I've got so many 6-drops, but it's hard not to run dances, at least this is one of, just because it is an important type of tool. But because you've got the 3 Darius, you don't want to be overly committal on the 6-drops. Going over the spells in Red Gwen is always something that like I mess around with constantly. So I have always been on Fervor in Red Gwen for like a long, long time, and I've also been on Vengeance in Red Gwen for a long, long time. Like, these are things that I've been running for months and months and months in Red Gwen. I'm a massive fan of these cards, and I won't run Vengeance and Fervor in my Red Gwens from now on. They're just amazing. We've also got the Vile Feast, the Ravenous Lock, and the Quietus that you remember from old Red Gwen. Decent tempo-based like interaction tools. The Vile Feast is interesting. It's primarily there for the Zoes and the Anivia eggs vial, and like their own Vile Feast. It's not amazing, but the Vile Feast does create some like important play patterns, especially just for like having, if you don't have the foyer, you might want like an even smaller unit to give yourself the hollow triggers. And Vile Feast isn't bad for that. Although Vile Feast isn't like entirely necessary, and I think I could have cut it if I really wanted to and go harder on the Quietus if my plan was to try and beat like Zoe and stuff. Because, like, Vile Feast can lose to, like, Zoe plus Pale Cascade hands, right? Pirouette is, like, the perfect card for this deck. Like, Pirouette is amazing. It does everything that Red Gwen wants. I would have added more Pirouette, but just because, like, they're not mid-range, you don't really need to stun all that much stuff, right? You only need to use Pirouette to, like, stun Anivia and ping off the Nexus or something. That's, like, the best thing Pirouette's ever going to do. But that's only once you get into the later game, and by that point, a similar play would be developing Fallen Reckoner, right? So Pirouette is really, really good in this deck, but just for like this week, it's one of the Pirouette's like less important matchups. But this is the Red Gwen list that I brought. I'm going to do a quick aside. I've been playing this on ladder for like the last few days or so. Samira Gwen, this is like a standard deck. This is just on ladder. This got nothing to do with the CDS. And I've been really enjoying this. This has been some of the most fun I've ever had in Legends of Runeterra, just playing this deck. Every single win feels different. It feels amazing. I want to talk about some specific cards. Camelvarine Dragon. If you go Opulent Foyer into Gwen, that's obviously like a very good combo, right? Because Opulent Foyer becomes like a 3-1, Gwen becomes a 4-4. It's a really good attack. But Opulent Foyer into Camelvarine Dragon is very similar in that if you have the defense token on 3, play Opulent Foyer, and then you do Camelvarine Dragon on 4, Camelvarine Dragon drains 1 from the Nexus, and then it also is a 7/5 fearsome fury that also still has the drain text. And if you went float Samira Foyer Dragon, Camelvarine Dragon also has Challenger now. And can get bigger because of Fury, can pick off anything that you want. Like, anything is going to be done to the Camelvarine Dragon, and you're going to be getting a positive trade out of it. I really like Camelvarine Dragon in this list as a replacement for the Free Attack Reckoner, which is obviously the Free Attack Reckoner is better, right? That's why there's no Camelvarine Dragon in this. But if you want extra 4-drops, which I think this deck does want to have like a big tempo play on 4, Camelvarine Dragon is that card. Pirouette feels amazing, obviously. I've got Soul Harvest because it's pretty decent into some of the stuff that I was expecting to find on ladder. Soul Harvest hits stuff like Seraphine, it hits stuff like Vigar, it hits like all of these things that you might want to kill. I've got these 2 Vengeances instead of the 1 Vengeance. I just found that like I was losing to Ash LeBlanc. And the reason I stopped playing this is because this loses to Ash LeBlanc. And you'll notice cards like Noxie and Tailstones and like Glimpse Beyond and these things. I have been cycling through like 10 different cards to try and find any that might beat Ash LeBlanc. I've gone through shit like Ferron, Extra Quietus. Not all of this is for the Ash LeBlanc matchup, by the way. These are just like the things that I've been changing around. Noxie and Tailstones, 3rd Pirouette, the 3rd Hate Spike that you're seeing here. There's been like a bunch of things. Undergrowth, Grasp of the Undying. There's been a bunch of things I've been trying to do. Unfortunately, since Ash LeBlanc is really good right now, the deck doesn't really work. But then just before Ash LeBlanc became really, really popular, this was a really good deck and I was really enjoying it. And I was climbing like crazy. I had something like a 76 to 80% win rate. It felt amazing. I really like this. I just wanted to mention this. If you like Red Gwen, check a deck out like this. Take out the Noxie and Tailstones. I added that before I played it with it. But yeah, like Pirouette feels amazing in this deck, and it just feels good. I really like Camelvarine Dragon. It does so many things. It even procs Plunder for your Pirouette. Like, it's just nice. Anyway, let's go over back to CDS stuff. Pantheon Varus, obviously, is a deck that I was planning on bringing. If I wanted to bring the most powerful decks every week, I think Pantheon Varus inevitably is on that list. You've seen this list every single time. I've still not changed a single card. I could have changed stuff like the Unforgiving Cult if I really, really wanted, but it's Pantheon Varus. Unforgiving Cult, it's fine, right? Like, it'll do the Pantheon Varus stuff. You've seen this deck every single week. It's not a big deal. Alright, Tree. If you're looking at this list and thinking, Spidz, what the fuck am I looking at? What has happened? Where are your multi-region cards? Yeah, this tree list is built really awkwardly. It's not the best tree list in the world. In fact, it's pretty bad. We've got 3 Tarics that are unnecessary. We've got 2 Divergent Paths because I'm in Targon. Obviously, I have to run Divergent Paths to get my tree. And then I've got all these control spells because I'm trying to, like, stop my lose conditions. And my win condition will happen at some point, eventually, if I just play tree and wait. So, this is how this tree list is built. Yordle Portal is just there to actually discard stuff. I wanted stuff that could discard stuff, but the deck became so bloated when I added, like, so many more discard things that Yordle Portal is the only layover from all of that. But yeah, the whole point is that you're supposed to make the enemy game and have a fun time and then eventually win. I actually quite like Tree. I miss Tree. I played a little bit of Tree when Tree was a lot better. I find Tree fun. I just like think it's cool to like create random cards and see what occurs. But obviously, like, this tree list isn't going to be like amazing. We'll talk about like how the tree matchups worked. But first, let's go over their decks. So they've got this deck called Zoe Victor. Their version of Zoe Victor is not amazing. I don't want to like lambast Ellzawn here. Like, I don't want this to be like a Ellzawn sucks at deck building. But there isn't any direct damage in this deck. That's main deck. There's none. So when I refer to stuff like Victor's Death Ray or Pharaohs into Hexsplit, like, those are their only points of damage-based interaction. You can see, like, they don't have Thermae, they don't have Mystic, they don't have High Note, they don't have Get Excited, they don't have Hexsplit, they don't have Shock Blast. Like, they're not running interaction. They don't have Sunburst, right? They're not running interaction, right? The best stuff they can get is, like, Star Shaping into, like, the Destroy 2 landmarks. Or 2 landmarks. Or maybe it's 3. I forget. Like, there's a bunch of things that they could invoke, but that's requiring invoke. That's like a one step further removed, right? It's one Kevin Bacon step away. Like, you want this stuff to be main decked. And so, while it's definitely doing, like, the random stuff ghost, like, emotional strategy, like, you've got all these things that create stuff. You've got Trail of Evidence and Encore and all these things that create stuff. Like, you're doing, like, the random bullshit go emotional reward. Unfortunately, you're not rewarded with wins because there's no Mystic Shard in their deck. I just wanted to point that out, but you can see, like, I'm going to be referring to the cards that aren't in this deck a lot, and it's important to know what these cards are being replaced with. So, during scrims, there was exactly one time where I wasn't paying attention, and they did Divine Judgment on Victor, and I either lost or won. It was really close. I think that they had Divine Judgment on Victor, and it was still pretty likely for me to win, and I ended up not for very specific reasons. But, like, you can see that they're not running all that much. And I did lose sometimes to Zoe, right? They've got a lot of chump blockers, and so if they actually just do Zoe into Sunforger, like they flip Zoe on like 10-6 or something, like that is a lose condition, and that is something that did happen 1 or 2 times, but that's not more likely than like a more standardly built version of this deck. This is their Anivia list. It's sort of what you'd expect, but sort of a bit off as well. You've got the Anivias, which is obviously the whole point of this deck is Anivia. You've got 3 Soul Cleave, which Jansport is still like adamant that like these CDS players should stop playing Soul Cleave, but I think the Soul Cleave is like okay. I don't know why there's 3 Sisters of a Flash Freeze. I don't know if you're ever going to be using Entomb or Fury them not that much. I think it should be 2 Flash Freeze and 1 3 Sisters or something. They're also not running 4 mana ramp. They're only running Catalyst and Modern Mysticism while also being on Avarose and Sentry. So that's a little bit interesting. There's a lot of interaction points that they don't have that much of. They don't have the Buried in Ice if that's their stuff. They don't have 3 Vengeance, right? There's a few things that this deck doesn't have. Now, I don't play Freljord SI Control. I can't verbalize exactly what is missing from this list. But I know that this is not a stock standard version of Anivia. It's missing things and so far. Okay. I want to quickly talk about some decks that we tried and didn't make the cut. The first is Taskmaster Mastery, suggested by Nas in the comment section after week 4. This is something I really wanted to try because I quite like Taskmaster, and it also had a bunch of new support in the new Noxus region stuff, right? So it was going to be a Taskmaster Noxus deck. But it struggled to be consistent against Anivia. It didn't work because it turned on like their Avalanches and Blighted Ravines way too well. And if you just clog up my board, I can't get a proper Powder Pandemonium at a tempo-based time. It ends up just being like, you know, I can't deal enough damage for it to be like better Decimate and that be like good enough. But it's also impossible for it to have like the vulnerable part matter because they'll just play Ruin and Avalanche and I'll be done. Taskmaster Monkeys was cute, but it wasn't consistent enough against Anivia. And like if my plan is to beat Anivia and Zoe Victor, I want these matchups to be consistent as hell. And if you were to say, like, which is the least consistent out of all of the decks that I could have possibly brought, which was Red Gwen, Monkeys, Tree, Varish Pantheon, and Deny Elites, the least consistent of them, unfortunately, was Monkeys, and so Monkeys didn't make the cut. Another deck that we tried was Sojourners, right? I've got my logo here because I tried both halves of my army, right? I tried the Taskmaster and I tried the Sojourners, and look, Noxus Sojourners was out of the picture because everything else needed Darius and they were slightly stronger. Ionian Sojourners struggle to beat specific types of freezes or being jumped by Zoe Victor, right? You do have stuff like Ghost and these things with Ionian Sojourners, but because you don't have rallies, like all they need is like 1 Harsh Winds and 1 freeze, and they're sort of already fine, right? They can get to the point where they stall out the game and then you're not going to feel great. Now, Deny is quite nice against Ruination stuff, but they can deal with your board pretty effectively. They freeze the big stuff, they do the Avalanche and the Vile Feast to ping off X2s and X3s, and you just sort of fail. But if they're being chumped, why not run to Marcia Sojourners? Which then struggled to the other problem, which was Ruination, right? Now you no longer have that Deny to try and beat Ruination. You can go aggressive, but if they just have, like, you know, enough of the 2-drop that draws a card, enough of the Vile Feast, a Vengeance on your Sojourners, like, you're not going to feel great. You can do the rally stuff, but it didn't feel amazing because they're obviously a freeze deck, which makes rally slightly worse. And then there was Deny Elites, which I'll touch on later, but Deny Elites was a pretty close contender. Alright, let's go to Spidz's super duper matchup ring. Let's talk about all of these matchups and why I think they're good. First off, we're banning Teemo. Teemo was never going to be considered. I think Teemo is an obvious ban if they're going to bring the same lineup where it's just all of this stuff, what we were expecting, Zoe and Anivia, and Teemo. We're banning the Teemo. So, I'm annoyed that it keeps like fracturing every single time I go to the next slide. Can I just like load them all in for a second? Okay, I think I've loaded them all in, so hopefully it doesn't keep fracturing whenever I click the button. Okay. Red Gwen into Anivia. We have got early aggression with the 8-1 drops. Hallowed scales really well into the late game to the point where they're forced to freeze like the X1s, basically. Shampoo for rally and Foyer for permanency are both really important cards against like Anivia and the Ruination stuff. And while they've only got 2 Ruinations that can spell Despair for Harrow, we're only on 1 because of this matchup, right? And finally, because of the way that like a Freelit SI deck works, they don't actually have a good way of killing Gwen as well as like some of this other stuff. Their best way of killing Gwen is Vengeance, and that's a 2 mana extra investment. And if we're an aggro deck, that's 2 mana that we're using to push like 7 damage or so. So freezes won't kill Gwen. In fact, it'll also still do the snip snip because they can't trade into the Gwen after they freeze her. So the cards like Gwen just become even more powerful, right? The short version, pressure the bird. It'll work out well. All right, Pantheon Varus versus Anivia. We've got too many threats. We've got Panth, we've got Varus, we've got Saga Seeker, we've got Heratzi. So they also have to deal with Spell Shield. We've got Pantheon, who can roll Spell Shield about 50% of the time. Slightly less now that Brash is in the keyword pool. And Expansive Protection, right? So we can either pre-commit it to deal with like freezes, or if they go in for a Vengeance, we can spend 2 mana and absolutely like beat their Vengeance stuff, right? They can only freeze so much, right? So we can attack on turn 5 with a pretty decent Saga Seeker. They might have to freeze it. We attack on turn 7 with a Varus and a Pantheon. We attack on turn 9 with a Varus and a Pantheon and the Saga Seeker and all of this stuff. They can only freeze so much of it, right? And fundamentally, look, I dislike this argument emotionally. It's a valid argument, but I really dislike when I say, oh, I'm going to win because my deck is just stronger than theirs. It feels less fun. It feels less like I'm using my brain to beat them and just using like, my stuff was released in the World Walker expansion. Your stuff was released during Foundations. But like, Pantheon Varus is a modern deck that's much higher power level than Anivia, which hasn't been good since like 1966, right? Like, obviously Pantheon Varus is going to be stronger just because it's a strong deck. Short version, pressure the bird. I want to make a quick note that the difference between Pantheon Varus and Deny Elites was a really close and unsure decision. Again, I'll explain more about Deny Elites later, but I just want to like, if you've got bells in your brain thinking like Spidz, if you're bringing something that's powerful, why not just bring the Deny Elites? I'll talk more about that later because it was pretty close. All right, Natri versus Anivia. In 10 turns, I actually just win the game. Anivia only kind of wins the game on turn 10. And they have no landmark removal. Now, I asked Jansport, hey, did you want to scrim this? And his immediate response was, Spidz, why? I don't really understand how, like, I can get the logic, but I need to scrim things in order to, like, have the qualia of knowing what I'm doing. Even if the knowing what I'm doing is obviously just going to be play tree and get tree to win. But I did this, like, twice, and then, like, after, like, turn 7, and I had tree on 4, and it was already, like, 6, like, it didn't matter that it wasn't that far. Like, what was Anivia gonna do? So yeah, it's miserable for Anivia. Play tree, win. It's just like Disc and Rise. It beats control for this very specific reason. Like, if they can't interact with your, like, insane combo that literally says win the game, not just win the game through units, but just I win the game, then obviously it's gonna beat Anivia. Alright, Gwen versus Zoe. I'm gonna reiterate this. They don't run damage. Right, my units will either trade into their units, like Spacey Sketcher or Zoe, or it hits the Nexus. There is no other, right? There is no, it gets Mystic Shot, it gets Caustic Rift, right? There is no other. The only answers to Gwen, or Darius, or Dancers, or Ballista, or Butler is Victor's Death Ray, or Reggie into Hexsplit, or Shock Blast, or sure, into Hextech Anomaly, into Vengeance, or all of these sorts of things. But that is how they beat this, right? What is my lose condition? Zoe Flip or Victor High Roll. So, that one Quietus, that one Pirouette, that 2 Vile Feast is there, also, like, still in the deck because of Zoe, right? And the 1 Vengeance and the 2 Can't Block Reckoners are for Victor, right? These aren't, like, insane counter, like, plays, right? Like, these aren't, like, massive tech cards, but, like, even these loose conditions, we've got pretty decent deck choices against them. TLDR, pressure them. Pantheon Varus versus Zoe Victor. Their only interaction for big units is Equinox and Crescent Strike from Spacey Sketcher or Zoe, Reggie into Hex Splitterator, Victor plus Challenger plus Augment plus, and then I got XX, which I'm just saying to mean like a certain amount of Augment such that it can kill Pantheon, or Hush, right? And they've got 1 Hush, which is important for this matchup especially. These all have to contend with the 2 Expansive Protection, the Pantheon Spell Shields, or Heratzi. What is the lose condition? Zoe. So Victor dies to Harsh Winds and Furious Wielder. Now Zoe also dies to Furious Wielder, but it's a 3 mana up investment, and it's not something that you can always do, especially if they've got Moonglow available. And they do it before you can like justifiably do Furious Wielder on like turn 4 or turn 5. As sort of, and this also beats Pursuit, right? If it gets to the point where they're playing Pursuit, hopefully I'm winning on my next attack token, so I just freeze the Pursuit and then win on the next attack token. How can we beat Zoe? Just like pressure them? Like they can't kill like Sargus. Oh, sorry, I woke up really early. I've got to turn off my alarms. Hold on. So the short version is like just pressure them, and they will have to either block with Zoe or like they'll have to spend a bunch of mana to do stuff, and it just won't work. TLDR, pressure them. Notice the theme. This will be relevant quite a bit later. Nah into Zoe. So, there's no landmark removal without star shaping going into something or Zoe 2 going into something, right? Like specific invoke stats. You just stall out. For Zoe, we have Pie Toss, Pokey Stick, Wallop, and if Sparkle comes to Cake, we've got Minimorph. Sparkle comes to Cake, by the way, is like if push comes to shove, but I tried to make it Zoe themed. I hope you appreciate that. For Victor, right, we can just chump block them until they get overwhelmed or elusive. At that point, we can Minimorph or Buster Shot or Wallop them. With Cat, Minimorph or Wallop. With Star Shaping, Minimorph or Wallop. I'm trying to lead you towards something, which is that this actually isn't a great matchup. It's actually more of a yellow matchup than a green matchup. So I went 4 and 2 when we were testing this. Now, 4 and 2 is not a good enough ratio for a deck where I'm bringing, like, an actively bad deck. Like, remember the deck list? It's Nah and Tarek and, like, a bunch of weird, like, awkward Vandal City control cards, right? Like, if it's not guaranteed that they're bringing Zoe Victor, let alone Zoe Victor with half of the cards that make Zoe Victor good. Like, they're only on 1 bar, they're on main deck, back alley, bar keep, there are no mystics, none of this other stuff. Right, like, this isn't the most powerful version of their deck. If they bring the most powerful Zoe Victor and I'm bringing this Nah, like, it's not going to be 4 and 2, it's going to be, like, 2 and 4 the other way around, right? So, this is improvable, right? This matchup isn't over, right? Like, I can change the deck list that I showed you. We could run 3 Minimorph. We could run more Pie Tosses. We could run Solari, Priestess, or Sunburst to try and get Comet as well. Like, we can run these big removal cards. And it's not like the Anivia matchup needs improvement. If we run 3 Tree and 2 Divergent Paths, Anivia has lost the game already, right? Hell, we could run, like, Nah aggro, right? That would beat Zoe Victor, and then run 3 Tree, and then it also beats Anivia. They're the same deck, right? Like, it is possible to make these matchups work. So why didn't I show you a list that was better? So, to paint you a picture of the timeline, it's night, we've tested a bit, I've tested all these matchups, we've left the night saying, are we bringing Nah or not, or are you approving Nah? I'm going to go to sleep. Do you remember this slide where I compared the champs? I told you what decks they could possibly bring. Remember that? This is him now. Feel old yet? So this was during trade week, right? So I did all of that scrimming before these trades came about, right? So Rammus Ranch Rangers, which is Ellzawn's team, doesn't have what I said it had. It actually has Aphelios, Renekton, and Yasuo in lieu of Yuumi. In lieu of Yuumi. In lieu of Teemo, Vi, and Maokai, right? This changes things, right? What does the addition of Renekton, Yasuo, and Fel do? If this is what the matchups were before, and this looks slightly ugly, but this is how it was looking the night before, if we construct, like, the worst possible lineup for us that they could bring, it's going to look something like this. Yasuo Aphelios, Renekton Kayn, which I think is a genuine deck. I think Renekton Kayn can work. It's not going to be amazing, but, like, Akshan Varus and Akshan Kayn are pretty decent. It's just going to be a glaive pressure deck, right? And then Teemo stuff with you know, Hecarim or with Caitlyn or whatever. This matchup's going to be bad. They're just going to stun my Gwens and my Yasuos. They're going to run Sunburst, presumably. They're going to have Lifesteal plus Yasuo when he's leveled, and then they stun one thing and I've lost the game, right? This matchup is probably okay, but not great. In theory, it's probably, like, the theory, I think, would say it's them favored based on the fact that they've got a bunch of stuns. But the flip side of that is my deck is, like, an extremely powerful deck that can probably beat them if we just get Expanses or a Spell Shield on Pantheon. But, like, they can definitely win this if they get certain stuff. If they get, like, Yasuo plus Healic, their Yasuo gets leveled, and then they just, like, play, like, 2 stuns, right? If they draw Yasuo Steel Tempest, like, twice, we probably just lose from that, right? Now, Nah Tree into Yasuo Aphelios, if we're trying to win the game on, like, turn 12 and they have any pressure tool ever, they're gonna beat this version of Nah Tree. This matchup, I think, is pretty decent. It's just going to be like a mid-range off, and I think my deck is going to be slightly better at doing that mid-range off. I think they could have hands that it's going to win with. We could have hands that it's going to win with. It's going to be quite close. If they get, like, Glaive plus Kayn, we might be in, like, a little bit of a tizzy, but if they don't draw their Glaive, they don't draw, like, Kayn or Renekton, right? They just draw stuff like the Merciless Hunters, but none of the big, powerful stuff. I think we could definitely win that matchup. This, I think, is favored for us. We're just the bigger cultist deck, right? Bigger cultist deck beats smaller cultist deck. While we both have, like, access to freezes, right? Our freezes are going to be more impactful against them, I think. And because we've got better access to, like, Pantheon and Saga Seeker and stuff, I think we're going to be better than them. But this matchup's also quite bad, right? What is Tree going to do against a pressure deck? And we have to consider this matchup now. Like, when I was ignoring Teemo earlier, let's consider Teemo now. Gwen and Darius should beat the Teemo deck, right? No matter what type of Teemo deck they're bringing, from Teemo Caitlyn to Teemo, like, Caitlyn Traps to Teemo, like, Hecarim Degenerate Burn to Teemo Asol Control, like, Gwen Darius should beat all of those sorts of things. Pantheon Varus should beat everything except, like, the Degenerate Teemo Burn ideas, right? If they bring Teemo Zoe, like, Elusives, or Teemo Hecarim, and it's just, like, Pansy, aggro, right? Like, we could definitely lose to that, right? And this is never gonna win, right? Like Nara is never gonna beat the Teemo deck, even if it's aggro. It could beat like an ASOL deck, but even then, like it may not genuinely. Like all of these matchups get a lot worse. This slide is quite ugly, but I'm gonna it's in contrast to this slide, which is a lot more green. This slide is a lot more red. So clearly something is going to have to change now that this trade deal has happened, because I don't want to play for like the best scenario. I want to make sure that even in this worst case scenario, I'm in a pretty comfortable position, right? Let's just highlight two of the main things that are happening here. Natri, clearly just like it doesn't work anymore. Like we're not going to be bringing Natri. If this is what their lineup could look like in theory, Natri, like we're not bringing Natri anymore. In addition, we've got a new ban priority. Like Yasuo Aphelios now clearly takes a ban priority over Teemo Zoe if we're going to be bringing this sort of lineup. Or not Teemo anything, right? Clearly Yasuo Aphelios takes priority in the bans, right? So what has changed? Goodbye to Tree. New ban priorities Yasuo Aphelios. And just as a side note, if they are split, I'm probably banning the Yasuo, but it could depend on whether like the Aphelios deck is scary or the Yasuo deck is scary. Like if they're together, I'm banning them. If they're separate, it depends on sort of what is occurring in the build of the decks, right? I would still bet that they're going to bring Anivia with Hecarim this time, which is just doing the same thing as Maokai. If anything, it's slightly better because it makes Soul Cleave slightly better, but whatever. Anivia, Zoe Victor, and X is likely. It's not unthinkable, though, that they would only bring either Zoe Victor or Anivia and bring two more pressure decks, or, as we saw before, neither, right? All of these are now in the cards, unlike before where I thought it was much less likely for that to happen. So, what did the Thirst decks do that the Tree deck didn't do? Pressure. I tried to, make that as a note earlier, right? The only difference between the Gnar deck and the other two decks is this idea of pressure, right? So, Gwen and Varus can beat Nebulous mid-range via pressure. It's not going to be a guaranteed matchup, but their method of winning is going to be via pressure, in the same way that it beats Zoe Victor and Anivia Control. So all we need to do is find another mid-range deck that can possibly beat Zoe Victor and Anivia Control and also Renekton Kayn mid-range up. Now, if you remember what my lineup is, right, it's got a lot of mid-range. This isn't going to be a tough challenge. Who's that peeking around the corner? That's right, it's the square hole. Sorry, I really wanted to share this image. I quite like it. This is like the perfect scenario for Illaoi. Like, as soon as this happened, like, Eniamore was like, you know what? Illaoi makes sense. Like, this is Illaoi time, right? This is my lineup. It was made for me. So let's pull back the curtain a little. I'm making this like a bit more artistic and like storylined than I really need to. Let's just pull back the curtain a little. Illaoi Shen or Fiora was probably better than Tree in the first case anyway, just because of the Zoe Victor matchup, right? Like, Tree would 100% be better into Anivia. Like, that is just like a winning matchup. There's no debating it. Illaoi Shen or Fiora probably would have been better than Tree, right? Just generally speaking. Now, we can build Tree to be like degenerate, like just everything in the deck is built to beat Zoe Victor. But by that point, like by the time in the timeline that I was maybe thinking of going that far, the deck lists had changed, right? What they could have brought had changed. Now we're moving on to Illaoi or Shen Fiora. Illaoi Shen or Illaoi Fiora. I will make a quick note. We could have changed the lineup a lot if we wanted. We could do Gnar with Darius and it becomes like old Tree with actual like House Spider and stuff. Right? We can bring Gwen Illaoi, we can bring Pantheon Varus. We can even bring like Gnar Thresh. I don't think that'd be too bad. Right? Like there are many ways you can build like these best of 3 lineups. There are so many lines and so many logics and optimizations. When I'm telling you my stories and my thought processes, these aren't going to be like the best, right? I'm sure you could improve all of these and be like entirely different and still have like slightly better numbers. I go as far based on the logic I decide to with the time that I have available to me, right? However, I had an itching for Red Gwen. I love that deck. It's definitely my favorite deck of all time. It's beaten Sivir for me at this point. I'm enamored with Red Gwen. And I wanted to bring that, and if we're bringing Red Gwen, then Red Gwen, Pantheon, Varus, Illaoi sort of made sense. Let's finally discuss elites. So, Illaoi Shen is better than Illaoi Fiora, because Deny is going to be better against the Ruinations, like the 2 Ruinations in the Deny deck, right? Like, Illaoi Shen will just do better stuff in these matchups for now. But why Deny Illaoi over Deny elites, right? Like, if the Shen is the main thing that's being, like, pretty decent here, why have I gone for Illaoi over elites? So, elites is going to struggle more into the Avalanche and Ravine half of Anivia. I don't know why I wrote more twice. Then, like, Shen will. Then Illaoi will. So, like, elites should be beating Avalanche Ravine stuff in general. That's not, like, too awful, right? If you're running Ranger's Resolve, you get your Bannerman and then play a few things afterwards. You're gonna feel, like, pretty fine to the Ravine Avalanche half. But there are worlds in which you don't draw your Bannerman and they do, like, Avalanche plus Sentry or Avalanche plus Vile Feast and they've killed, like, two of your units, they've neutralized another unit, and you've played 4 cards and they've played 2, and at that point you've only got 4 cards left in hand. At that point, like, they start freezing your stuff on your attack tokens, and then it gets to turn 9 and you sort of only have like a middling board that you've kind of gotten through scraps because of that Avalanche and Ravine earlier, and now they're starting to play Nivea and beating you down with your Nivea stuff or controlling your board. That's like if I medium or low roll and they medium or high roll, right? It's not going to feel great. Typically, though, elites high rolls more than it doesn't. I know that's not technically true. Like, that's just statistically not a valid sentence, but I hope you're trying to, like, get what I'm putting down here. The other thing is, like, deny hurts bannerman chances. Less than 2 denies is not as comfy as what Alawi Shen can do into Ruination, because Alawi Shen can run 3 denies, right? But if you run more than 2 denies, you run the 3 denies, you're making bannerman even less likely to occur. And finally, you can run cards like Cinco and even more Ionia cards to beat stuff like Vengeance. So Deny Alawi made more sense than Deny Elites. There are arguments that Deny Elites isn't bad against Ruination decks, right? Like, I brought it in the Absol week because they don't run Freljord, so the idea of losing your board to early stuff isn't as important, right? The way that Darkness beats early decks is via Vile Feast and, like, you know, developing, like, small units, right? But the way that this deck beats it is through board clears. And that slight difference means that Deny is better into, like, the Darkness type of Ruination than it is into the FTR and Avalanche type of Ruination. So that's why Deny Alawi over Deny Elites. And that's why we didn't end up bringing Elites. Same with, like, the Elites versus the Pantheon Varus argument. It's this sort of stuff where Elites isn't bad. I think Deny Elites can work quite well, but I think Deny Alawi is better. So this is the Alawi Shen. I'm going to quickly talk about some of the cards in here. Eye of God was a late inclusion because we found that we needed just a few more ways to spawn tentacles. We've got a fair few draw cards in Fortune Croaker and Assassin, but it's just got like a fair few spawn cards, and once you've got a spawn unit down, you protect that and Alawi and you try and win, or that and Seize Voice and try and win. The one Spirit's Refuge to try and beat those sorts of like possible mid-range stuff. Same with Unworthy Soul. Like, these aren't going to be great into Anivia. By the way, this construction going, I really hope you can't hear that, or the audio quality is going to be awful. Unworthy Soul and Spirit Refuge is just for the Renekton stuff, right? Like, just in case they bring that sort of stuff. We've got the 3 denies, which was like the main point that I wanted to bring this with, which is like 3 denies, say goodbye to like Ruination if at all possible. The Ghost is sort of there for like Zoe, just in case like they do play Zoe and they attack with 2, and then I play like Kroger into Ghost, like that way Zoe dies. Ghost isn't necessary into like Anivia stuff, but it can also help for like specific types of blowouts against Renekton, Kane. We're not running stuff like Buru Leader because I don't think it's necessary with the way this is built. We're not running certain things like second Nagakiboros. I didn't want to rely on Nagakiboros too much because that's at the point where they could play Ruination and it would be difficult to hold up Denial unless it's turn 9. But by turn 9, there are other things we could have developed on turn 8 to be a bit more scary. But this is the version of Evaluation. It's sort of similar to like Infinite Patrons from, and like a Jansport ended up looking at Infinite Patrons deck from like the Aegis tournament, but we're taking out a lot of the stuff that's a hedge against aggro, such as Pra and such as like some more of like the lower to the ground interaction pieces. But this is what we brought for Evaluation. So let's get back to the super duper matchup ring. This is now what our side looks like. We've replaced the Nah with the Alawi stuff. And now we've got a less of a specific guess of what they're going to bring. So I've put it like this. There are 3 types of deck they can bring. They can bring Yasuo Aphelios. They can bring mid-range nonsense that's either Renekton Kayn or it's Teemo Caitlyn or it's Teemo like Hecarim or whatever. And then they've got the old control decks that we've been talking about this whole time, right? Anivia and Zoe, right? By the way, I've not talked about Hecarim without Anivia that much. I've not talked about Caitlyn that much. Not talked about Azor that much. They would be tier 2 and tier 3, type 2 and type 3 in subs of this format. But I'm just going to be showing these. This is in order of what I would be banning. So if they bring Yasuo Aphelios, I'm banning it. Otherwise, if they don't, I'm banning the Renekton deck or the Teemo deck, whatever's like the more scary mid-range deck at the time. And let's go over these matchups. All 3 of these decks are intended to beat these 2 decks, right? This is the whole point of the lineup back to ages ago. All of these 3 matchups should be favored. All of these matchups are yellow. Now, this is because I put both of these in the one category. Like, Gwen's going to do really good into the Teemo stuff and be yellow into the Renekton Kayn stuff. It should be like 55 or 60% for Gwen Darius, but that's just something we're being wary of. Pantheon Varus is the other way around. It should be like, you know, quite good 70% or more into Renekton Kayn, but be slightly worse into like a very aggro version of Teemo. And then Alawi Shen should be like pretty good into Teemo just because you'll be so aggressive even if they bring like mid-range or aggro. But if they've got Renekton Kayn and they have like a really good unforgiving cold and you don't draw a lot of your like good tentacle stuff, or you miss out on 1 or 2 important cards, Renekton King could be a bad matchup. But in general, like when I have these yellows here, one of these 2 options is super favored, one of these 2 options is only slightly favored. But if I'm bringing what I want to like destroy Ellzawn, my aim is to have phenomenal matchups, not just like pretty decent matchups. All right. This was a long slideshow. I intended this one to be short. Like in my head, I wanted a slideshow that was like 12 slides, and then I just kept adding and adding, and we're 57 slides later, and here we are. It's even longer than the Macrogy one. And if anyone's been watching any sort of Spidz YouTube for any period of time, you know I've got spreadsheets for everything. I've got a spreadsheet for the CDS stuff now, and you can see how many slides I brought each week, and you know, Ellzawn is definitely like above the rest. I wanted to give a quick thanks for like the support for the CDS stuff so far. I've been quite enjoying making it. It's a lot of effort for me. It takes like over 8 hours to make these, generally speaking, more or less depending on like the thing, right? So like this slideshow took me slightly over 2 hours. It could have taken less time, but I have to plan how I want the slideshow to look and the story I want to tell. I want to have to make sure the graphics work together, and like I've been trying to do all the slideshows in slightly different ways to make them, you know, slightly cooler. But they take a while, and then the montage takes like, you know, it may not appear as that long, but it takes like a good 3 or more hours, especially since I'm not like a particularly quick worker. Like I rewatch it just to make sure like the flowing is right and all of that quite often, and you know, all the little cuts, trying to time everything to the music, which is fun for me, but it takes a long time. And then like the recording of the VOD review stuff obviously just takes the time on the tin, like half an hour to an hour. And then there's the re-listening to it all, which takes about like 2 hours to cut out all the coughing, adding a little bit of graphics just in case it needs it, right? These sorts of things. So like it's a lot of work that goes into these. I'm obviously like a student with no responsibilities. Like I've got the time to afford. I know James will like read everything because he's everywhere, and then like inform me if it's like about me. And James read a comment somewhere about someone saying that like, you know, more people should do content like Spidz regarding CDS, or like Spidz is like doing a lot for CDS, you know. I wish other creators did like quite a bit. I don't blame them for not doing this much. Like I'm putting a lot of time into these. I can afford that. I don't do anything else regarding content, not really. Right? I've got the Hades stuff, but that's a lot easier to do. It's 2 hours to record, 2 hours to listen through, cutting out all the coughs, and like maybe adding a joke or two. Like that's a very easy thing to do. I don't stream these games. I'm the only one that I think isn't streaming. Right, like I don't stream my games. I don't like do other LOR stuff. Like Icardo streams for like multiple hours a day. I don't expect him to put another 8 hours into this sort of stuff, right? But what I am doing, I quite enjoy, at least for the time being, and I'm really glad that it seems like a fair few of you enjoy it as well. So thank you for showing support for this. And then just like enjoy the montage, and then we'll do the VOD reviews, and then you'll be done with the Spidz YouTube for the day. Bye. Well, with Varus, we can go for lethal. Could play Gwen, but if they stun Gwen, I'm in like a super weird position. I wonder if I'm supposed to Shunpo now. If they deny, then I do Gwen and feel like okay about life. Or am I just supposed to play Gwen? They stun Gwen, then what? What am I doing? I just need to deal 2 damage. So you know what? Let's do Shunpo. They deny Shunpo, I play Gwen, I open, and then I've got thing. Okay, I think Shunpo's great. If they deny Shunpo, I'm happier than if they kill Gwen. I think. Okay. Alright, I hope you enjoyed the montage. I've not watched it yet because I've not made it yet, and therefore I don't know what I'm doing in the montage. I've got a few ideas on what I want to do, but I haven't done that yet. But as you would have saw, we went 2-0, which is the first week that we went 2-0, and hopefully I included that statistic somewhere. In fact, everyone went 2-0 or 0-2 this week, which I thought was pretty interesting. They banned our Illaoi Shen, and we banned their, I think it was like a Renekton Caitlyn or something like that. Watching back their VOD, right, because everyone streams it except me, I think. Watching back their VOD, they mentioned that they really like Renekton Caitlyn. In fact, Renekton Caitlyn was just like a deck they were playing, just like in like regular mode. So maybe if I had known that ahead of time, I would have expected Renekton Caitlyn, but it was similar to like the Renekton Kayn stuff that we were expecting, right? Or at least had considered. But they obviously had Yasuo and Nivea, which was a really interesting deck, and I had a really big struggle deciding between Yasuo, Nivea, and Renekton Caitlyn. Because the Yasuo stuff, like, if they get enough Steel Tempests, can pose a problem. But the other side of that is that, like, they can't kill anything. They actually don't have any kill spells in those regions. They can't kill Gwen, they can't kill Darius, they can't kill Pantheon. So eventually, like, I will out-attrition them. It's just that they can actually put, like, a 4-4 on the board, and I have to think about a 4-4 at least a little. So I ended up banning the Caitlyn deck. I just assumed that it would probably have a higher chance of running me through. Now, their Caitlyn deck wasn't particularly, like, it didn't have a glaive, which was my main concern, like a big glaive sort of hand. It was more of like a trap-focused deck, but it was something that still concerned me. And I think what the main issue was, is they were on something like, they might have been on, like, 2 Grappling Hook, 3 Desert Jewel, and if Grappling Hook was rotated, it was Desert Jewel and something else. And that sort of interaction made me scared for the Red Gwen list. I thought Red Gwen might struggle against that if they just do, you know, Renekton plus Desert Jewel onto my Gwen. All of a sudden, I've lost a lot of tempo, and they have like a pretty decent Gwen that's also pretty decent Renekton that's starting to level up. But let's go through this. I've increased the speed. We're on VLC Media Player instead of old films and TV. We miss old films and TV, but let's go watch this. They removed Eternal. Best of threes. So I've got to make sure I think about this properly. Yeah, right. So they removed Eternal Best of Threes, which means like the normal setup is something I have to manually think about. Like, what deck do I want to bring up first? Since it's a completely different visual menu, like I've got to think about it in like a slightly different way. It just changes how you think about things if you see things in different ways. So I know you would have probably seen that in the montage, but Alawi Shin, and I banned Caitlyn Renekton. Although maybe Yasuo and Nivea was bad. It's so tough to decide between Yasuo and Nivea and Caitlyn Renekton. Both of them have like high roll hands and low roll hands. There are certain cards in Yasuo and Nivea that I think are scarier than Renekton Caitlyn cards, but I think Renekton Caitlyn can get away with the game easier. But I think I'm going to start with Acquiescence. I think that makes sense to me. I think I'm going to start with Acquiescence. But I don't know. I'm always nervous every single time I play Legends of Runeterra. I never think I'm going to win a best of 3. But, alright. Okay. So they're on Zoe. Right, so I think this mulligan is relatively obvious. I kicked everything. I think you could argue keeping Expanse's protection, but because they're not on Hex Split or anything, Expanse's only really hits Hush. Right, but obviously none of these cards are worth keeping. And in this matchup, we're just trying to like apply pressure, right? Get the Saga Seeker, get a Pantheon, get a Varus at some point, and try and win the game that way. I'm not keeping any of these. Please give me units. Okay, this is a lot better, thanks. So nervous. I'm always nervous when playing this video game. Is there a reason there's no music? There we go. Music. I'm gonna start with Forsaker to try and find like something. Oh, I would have loved the weapon. Pale, probably. It could be a pass. I really want the weapon. So I think I'm gonna pass. Right, so I'm not entirely sure about this. When it comes to Pantheon and Varus, I'm not like the best at trying to work out what the best plays are. My thinking is that I really wanted a way to proc, like the thing on 2, right? Like proc Pantheon on 2, start getting it towards that happening. And I didn't want to take something like the Pale Cascade because it would be unprocced. So I could do that on turn 3. I already have things I can do on turn 2 that aren't gonna like be too bad, like the second Forsaken and the Saga Seeker into something like whatever we get on for the turn 3. But the chance of getting Dark and Lodestone was quite appealing to me, because if I can get Dark and Lodestone, then I can actually start progressing the win condition quite easily. So that's why I did hit past that. Now, you might disagree. You might think, hey, Spidz, you should just take Pale Cascade so that you can do Forsaken into Saga Seeker into Pale Cascade on the turn 3. But I don't think it's like a bad play, especially since they can't interact with Saga Seeker. Right, like they just don't have that in their deck, so I don't think it's like a bad play at all. But I really wanted the weapon. I thought it would be quite strong. It would add stats, and they can't deal with stats because they don't have any interaction pieces, so that was my logic there, at least. I don't know if it's entirely founded. I think you can definitely make an argument that the best thing to do there is take Pale Cascade. I want the weapon. I want to do Forsaken Pekaitic, look for another weapon if I don't get it, and then do Saga Seeker. Spacey, they're in 2 Spacey. I'm nervous. Life's ending. We're all gonna die. They guard a Ballistic Bot, which is interesting. I think I'm passing it. Yeah, so that one surprised me. I thought Ballistic Bot would have been one of their better cards. Now, obviously, it doesn't trade into things necessarily, although it is a 1/3 now. But it was interesting to think that like their hand must have like a lot of units if they're willing to discard Ballistic Bot, or like a lot of good things. Because Ballistic Bot, I think, is in the top 50% of cards in the deck, not the bottom 50%. I don't think I'm doing this trade. So they don't have any interaction, by the way. This is like a big thing. They don't have interaction in their deck. Oh my lord, I am the best video gamer of all time. Okay, I didn't remember that this happened, but okay. I'm the best video gamer of all time. I had no reason. I genuinely have forgotten everything about this game except one play. But okay. Nice. Good job, Spidz. I think we'll just do Saga Seeker and then immediately do Lodestone. I don't know what the fear point is. They can't interact with Saga Seeker. They don't run interaction. There's no damage in their deck. They don't run something that does damage except the Victor's Death Ray. And like technically Encore and Ballistic Bite. But I'm going to hit them with the Saga Seeker and then do the Lodestone next turn and then see what happens after that. I'm very willing to do this trade, thank you. This was weird. So I think I should have done Forsaken Bakai so that I can block the 1/1. Because I think if that happens, I'd be willing to block it just because I either get to attack with Saga Seeker and it doesn't get chump blocked or it trades into something that I think they want to keep around. So I think I should have played Forsaken Bakai here. I reckon I can Forsaken actually. So maybe I should have done it the other way around. I'm so nervous. I'm sorry. I should have done Forsaken Bakai. That's my bad. I'm so nervous when it comes to this video game. Although I think a second Varus is good. And I actually like that it gives the +1/+1. I think that's a good thing. Yeah, so the +1/+1 actually does matter here, because what are they going to play here that, like, blocks the 1/1? They can play second Reggie, which is not bad, but remember, I'm doing Dark and Lodestone, so the thing's going to be a 4/3. Right, Varus is also quite nice. I don't think Varus is a bad take here, because we've already got 2 more procs with the Lunar Cultist. We'll have a couple more draws before the Varus stuff matters. Plus, second Varus does technically proc Faded and continues on the Pantheon chain. So I think, like, picking that just to get the extra stats from the unit is really good, especially in this matchup where they can't deal with the 2 health unit. They can't deal with it. So we'll do this turn, we'll do this next turn. I think we'll be able to pop. And eventually a 3 health unit, right? I really like the stats that we get them, because what are they going to do here? They can play Loping, that's their only 3-drop. They can play Servant. No, alright, perfect. This is exactly what I wanted to say. They could have done Ambush to trade into this, but I think I'd say okay bet in response to that. They should have one of that card and one of this card. So they should have 2 cards that are randomly generated. One from Spacey, one from Telescope. And one from Ferris, actually. So they've got 3 cards. 6 cost, Telescope, Spacey. Don't know why I'm shaking. Really want to win. Unending Wave ain't awful. So Hex Split is one of their ways they can pull Saga Seeker and make my life a little bit sad because I lose the thing as well. But they have to get Hex Split off Reggie. Right? Like, I can't state this enough. They don't run anything. Zoe is scary. I do need a way of dealing with Zoe. Zoe is one of the ways they can definitely win this matchup. To the point where, like, we could just do Varus and then, like, Varus is, like, pull. Try and do something there. But I'm not entirely sure if that's a good choice. Second Pharaohs. I do require me some Pantheon, and I think I will need a way to kill Zoe eventually. Very nervous. You haven't done that much damage to their Nexus. They've had a lot of their early units. Like, they're a very unit early deck. Yeah, so they've played 5 units so far, and they discarded a unit earlier. Like, this unit is more... This deck is more unit heavy than other iterations of this sort of archetype. And so that is pretty decent against me, right? Like, they can chump block this Saga Seeker rather than, like, typical versions where the Saga Seeker, like, forces the last block on their last unit. Like, they can save one of their units to block it next turn. Like, they should feel comfortable about this Saga Seeker version of the build. Could I wait and do Varus and stuff later on, as opposed to just doing Varus's pull this turn? I don't think Varus's pull is bad this turn, like, at all. I think Varus's pull is fine. So let's explain this play, because there's a bit of, like, a difficulty in, like, the 2 options I've got available. One is to open attack, be aggressive, deal some damage, and do Varus stuff next turn, right? Or I could develop, gives them the chance of doing double stun, either from Spacey Sketcher or from Zoe's typical Star Chat, and... you know, they will do that because it blocks 8 damage, right? It blocks 9, really. But if they don't have that, then the idea is that we're going to do chain... You know, Varus is chain champion spell, right? Where we get to pull the Zoe in. Because remember, if we go back to the slides, right? Like, the only lose condition that we really have is Zoe somehow pogging out. And so using our interaction piece of this Varus, remembering we're still going to get a guaranteed draw of Varus if we just draw 3 cultist spells, means that, like, we can... justify losing our Varus and our Varus champion spell and still getting a Varus champion spell later on, right? And they can't kill Varus. They would need to have Hex Split, right? And Hex Split on Varus is not Hex Split on Haratzi and Saga Seeker. So that was the logic. It was a bit of a difference between, do we want to let them have the chance of getting double stun? Because remember, if they do get double stun, right, this whole idea of getting rid of Zoe before she becomes a problem is much harder, because the next opportunity we have to kill Zoe is turn 7, right? They're going to have 6+6+7 mana by that point. They're going to have like 23 mana. No, 19. They're gonna have 19 mana. That's a fair bit of mana to play 6 more cards, right? So it's like, if we don't kill Zoe here, Zoe very likely flips, which is why I think I ended up going for the Varus, that, like, it is pretty likely to think that Zoe will flip by that point, lest we not get a Furious Builder or something. But if we do it next time, we might have 2 pulls with the Varus. I'm so scared of Zoe getting out of control, though. It's such a fear point of mine that Zoe goes out of control. What else am I spending mana on? I think I'm supposed to develop Varus. So this last bit of logic is the thing that convinces me to play Varus, is that I'm actually not spending money on mana or anything else. if I open and then they do stuff, like, am I going to be playing Varus afterwards? That is fine, but I'd rather, like, actually deal with their board, start making things scary for them. And that includes developing a 4/4. Quick attack. If they play Victor, we'll go for Victor instead. If they do the double stun, that's one of, like, the only fear points of playing Varus. Yeah, like, double stun. From that. Even still, we can kill Zoe, though. Formula. Oh, that's beautiful. Thanks. I mean, they've got a lot of cards. It's not that beautiful. Flash. Okay. I think I'm correct in doing Chain of Corruption. I think the way I lose is, like, letting Zoe have stuff happen. And so I think I want to... Okay, so that was from Species Catcher. Sure. I think I'm still playing Chain of Corruption. So only at this point do I realize that I can still play Chain of Corruption, right? I only realize this at this point in life, which is great, right? This allows me to kill the Zoe, and I still got to develop stuff, and I got to get rid of their super cool star chart. They spent a bunch of mana this turn. They spent 6 mana to do, like, just draw. And while they do have a lot of cards in hand, like, I'm going to play pressure, and we've looked at their deck list. Drawing doesn't help them, right? Letting them draw doesn't do anything. Uh-oh. I pressed the button. Removed Eternal. Yes. I think it's one of the ways I lose. Okay, thanks. I don't know what I did, but we fixed it. Vulnerable. I'll just buff up Faded Man. Yep, so I buff up Faded Man because, like, I wanted to have this thing be a larger and larger threat. The way it can die, if not through Hexsplit or Hush, is just through, like, getting hit repeatedly through chumps. So may as well hit that with the thing. The old alternative is to give +1 strength to Varus, or give +1 strength to one of these guys, but I don't think that's really necessary. I'll offer this. What we could do is give +1 strength to Lunari Cultist to pull Zoe here, such that this trade is a positive trade for me. So that could have been an alternative lane, right? So it gets rid of -2/-1 on the Saga Seeker, right? But what we do allow is that we hit in for 2 more damage, as opposed to just this trade happening anyway, and this would obviously stay here. So I think that, like, is a line. I don't think it's a bad line. I think buffing up the Saga Seeker isn't, like, awful at all. Now I know I end up getting an Overwhelm weapon, which isn't guaranteed, but, like, any other weapon from Fearsome to Scout to anything wants this Saga Seeker to be larger, right? So any Wandering Shepherd besides, like, Can't Block and, like, Combat Reel, don't care about the Saga Seeker stats, but everything else does. Like, giving keywords, any keyword's going to be good against this deck. So that's, I think, a reason to give it to the Saga Seeker. But you know what? If you wanted to push 2 more damage, you could totally put the Vulnerable here, put the +2 here. They either do this block, which is great, right? Removing their chumps is amazing for us because it means our next attack is even stronger. Or, you know, we hit them for 2, which is fine. It's 2 damage. And this, like, buff will still be, like, fine. They've got a lot more card advantage than I. They could definitely find a way to beat me here. I think we're playing on... By the way, the buff is temporary, so it's only +1/+1. And it's only 2 damage. Unless we top deck a Pantheon. Oh, okay, you know what? I'm wondering Shepherding Saga Seeker and doing anything with turn back, I think. I've gotten really lucky with these draws. Let's, like, analyze what the draws were, right? We had Haratsi, which was a skipped predict. We had this guy, which I just mentioned, like, giving Sasa Saga Seeker turns on this guy more than, like, other things. And we managed to, like, predict 2 Varuses and get our Lunari Cultist from our mulligan. Right, like, this was a great full... We mulliganed everything away. It was 3 Pale Cascades and an Expanses protection. And look where we're at now. We've got Expanses to beat that random Hexsplit that they could have gotten. And I'm going to spoil what their hand was. They had the 7 mana Kale card that's basically Celestial Impact. I think that's what it's called, Celestial Impact. It's basically like the 6 mana Invoke, but it heals 3. They actually had that, so, like, they don't have the money here to afford it. But this would have come in handy against that if they had it. Or if they did end up getting, like, you know, something else from Reggie, like Hexsplit, having this would have been amazing. But, like, we have drawn everything that we've needed from what was a full kick. Now, there's 2 things you can say for this. One is that Spidz, you're really lucky, good job. The other thing you can say is Varus Pantheon is a deck that's built to do this sort of shit. Right, Varus Pantheon, you get 1 Faded unit, and you get just, like, every other draw ends up being, like, the best thing you can draw, because that's how Varus Pantheon is built. Anyway. Maybe I'm overly committal on the Zoe. Like, if they do have a second Zoe here, that would just, like, a complete another wave. They can silence Saga Seeker. Maybe I need a second Varus. They can't kill Varus. Like, they have to have found Hexsplit from 2 of their Reggies or Flash. Or they can't even find, I don't know, Victor. Okay. I will do Shepherd. And then we'll open on Ending Wave next turn, I think. I would love to take Overwhelm. Thanks. Overwhelm was clearly the best choice there. The second best choice would obviously be Scout, I think. But Overwhelm's amazing just because it, like, it pressures so much. Overwhelm is certainly in my wheelhouse. I do have to worry about double stun. Like, if I do get Pantheon, I probably still have to worry a little bit about double stun. Huh, understandable. Although if I do double stun, I'm probably doing expanses, but let's do ending. We have to look for Pantheon. Luminary Cultist Varus. Well, with Varus, we can go for lethal. No way. Wait, hold on. I lose 3, I'm adding 3, and I've got expanses. There's no way that's right, but I'm scared it is. I'm scared this is right. I'm scared I'm supposed to go for lethal here. What is their counterplay? Hush? Guiding Touch? I think we should slow it down. We don't need to rush it. We don't need to go for lethal, I don't think. And if we're not going for lethal, then what's our plan for Victor if we want to beat Hush? Because if we just put on a play around Hush, we can like pre-commit expanses to play around Hush. That's about it. But I think... Well, at the very least, I know I'm doing this. But I'm running out of time very quickly. This animation's going to take forever, by the way. What we can do is we can actually do this. That way they need to hush something, but not everything. No, never mind. This doesn't work the way I wanted it to. I just don't know if this is worth it. Like, do we just say they don't have hush? If they've got hush, this trade will happen and I'll cry anyway. I think this is worth it. I think we just say they don't have hush. So that final statement is the most important statement of this whole thing. But let's recap what happened this turn. First off, the draw spell. The draw spell is best used on your open attacks, and there's a good reason for this. If you're using it defensively, you're trying to look for like either specific units that you want to play, right? You've got unit time, you've got nothing else to spend your mana on, so you're looking for units. Or you're looking for like interaction pieces, like Unforgiving, Cold, and Furious Builder, which is unlikely, and the issue is that then they become fleeting. So the things that you would have drawn, if you're not able to play them, doesn't feel amazing, right? You can play it defensively. Sometimes it does get played defensively. That's just sometimes what the card has to do, right? It's your best out is to play this defensively and try and find your Unforgiving, Cold, and Furious Builders. But in general, I find that the best time to play this is on an open attack, just like this one, where you're looking for something like a momentous choice, right? To proc things. You're looking for Varus, right? As we were looking for. Momentous choice, again, would draw us Varus, for example, right? And doing that before combat, because Varus, obviously, you want to do before combat, so you can choose where the vulnerables go, is quite nice. And this is the best time to use that sort of Iberos draw spell. Now, we've got an issue here, right? We can go for lethal, right? This is the pull to lethal, where we try and pull everything to the side, and then we've got these 19 damage going forward. Or we can do what I would want to do, which is to stall out the game, right? So we have the capacity to stall out the game such that we kill Victor with the Saga Seeker. That way we're trying to beat things like Star Shaping, right? Because Star Shaping would keep them alive here. Sort of, we can add... Yeah, Star Shaping would keep them alive here. If we wanted to beat Star Shaping, we could have pre-committed a gem. But for some reason, I wanted to keep up the spell shield to try and beat an invoked Hextech. Not anomaly, what's it called? An invoked Hexobliterator, right? So it's this option, right? We can either beat Star Shaping by doing gem. We can try and beat a created Hexobliterator with Expansive Protection, right? You can obviously pre-commit Expansive Protection, but I don't think that's entirely necessary. Especially since they could just Hexsplit the other unit and then you've wasted Expansive Protection pretty much. Star Shaping is more likely than Hexobliterator, but if they've got Star Shaping, like, what are they doing? They're wasting their entire turn playing Star Shaping. It's not going to be lethal. While they could get, like, double Obliterate by also spending mana on the typical Star Chart, we still have the Spell Shield. We can protect one of our units. We can develop pretty decently, right? We're not going to be in, like, too much trouble, and they're going to be at low HP because Star Shaping only keeps them at 2 health, right? So the Star Shaping line is pretty decent for us. The other card that they could have is Hush, and I hope I'm going to put this graphic either on the screen right now or during the thing. But let's analyze, like, what is the deal with Hush, right? In the event that they do have Hush, we've got 2 options, right? We can pull Victor to the Luminary Cultist, and Saga Seeker stays alive, and Victor stays alive, right? Or if we pull Victor with Varus or Saga Seeker, right? Probably Saga Seeker. But it could be Varus. I mean, Varus is an awful option because we can, like, give Varus +2 strength, I think, by leveling him up. And therefore, it would still kill Victor. But then we're not pushing lethal. Like, they don't have to pre-commit that anymore. Or we have to pre-commit the thing. At that point, we're starting to worry about the same, like, Hexobliterator stuff, right? We can pull Victor into the Saga Seeker. But if they do have Hush, then we've lost Saga Seeker for no reason, and they've got Victor alive, right? So the difference here is that they are right now forced to use Hush if they've got it, right? Not entirely, right? If they've got the Star Shipping, they can do the Star Shipping. But if Hush is their way to beat our attack, they have to Hush right now. If they Hush the Saga Seeker or the Varus, we're not losing that unit anymore, right? But if we were to put the Victor in that position, to try and get like that trade to happen more favorably, right? Then we've lost our unit for no reason. So in the event of Hush, Victor stays alive no matter what. That's why I'm pulling Victor here as opposed to in front of the Saga Seeker or the Varus. Now, this is probably pretty obvious to a lot of people, but I think, like, I didn't formulate this properly when I was doing the VOD, like, doing the talking. And thinking about how to play around Hush in this capacity, I think, is quite nice. The two options, right? Or they've got three options for survival, right? Heal out of range via Star Shaping, Hush, or Hexpliterator from Reggie, right? Or it could be a few other things. It can be Hextech Anomaly Interventions from Reggie, right? It could be things, but, like, Reggie, Fast Speed, Star Shaping, or Hush. In the event of Hush, this is the right pull. In the event of Star Shaping, this is the right pull only to like force Star Shaping out, right? That way they're not replaying Victor or something, right? This isn't too bad into Star Shaping. We can still feel fine into Star Shaping. Although we should have pre-committed the gem if we wanted to beat Star Shaping. Or committal from Reggie. At that point, I wanted to keep this. So the best of those three options for me is Star Shaping. So I'm not going to play around that Star Shaping too much. The worst of those for me is Hush, but we've played around that by pulling with the Luminary Cultist. The middle of those is something invoked from Reggie, so we've kept our 2-mana Spell Shield. I think a lot of this is pretty understandable, but I just wanted to formulate it into these words, because I think the logic for this attack can be justified in a few ways, right? Because let's say they got the Star Shaping, and all of a sudden Victor's alive. What if it gets, Lifesteal one turn, Challenger the next turn? Then we try and kill it, and they play Divine Inspiration, right? Like, that is an option. I still think this is the most likely line to save me from the most things. Encore? They could do double guiding, they could do guiding Star Shaping. Kinda, sorta. Fail. I guess if I wanted to play around Star Shaping, I should have pre-committed the gem. Hope you guys don't mind me rant. Like, it's a Spidz VOD review. Like, I'm hoping that you guys don't mind me talking about this stuff. But is this sort of stuff useful? Because I don't know if this is, like, the obviousness or if this is not, like, informative. Like, I spent, like, 5 minutes talking about this, mostly repeating the same stuff. I don't know if that's sort of useful or not. I just sort of speak and hope that it's valuable. But I'm not entirely sure what is, like, the most valuable thing I can be doing in the VOD reviews. But I don't know. Also, I probably should have dragged the 220 like a second. Oh, well, alright. Sorry, Ellzawn. I think that was a weird game, but their deck doesn't run Mystic or Get Excited or Thermo or a lot of the removal stuff. When I was screaming with Chancellor, like, all he would say is, that the deck isn't running Interaction. And it's true, like, the only stuff that says damage that isn't invoked is Victor's Depe. So if we summarize what happened that game, right, we got really lucky that we had our 2 main pressure tools, right? We had Saga Seeker that ended up getting overwhelmed at some point, which was quite nice. Now, that wasn't actually necessary, but because of how the Varus draw ended up happening, but, like, it was nice that we ended up having all that stuff, and we managed to draw into everything that we needed, right? Especially the Haratsi giving us that attack with the Forsaken Bakai. Now, we could have done things differently. They did have the jump blockers, but they just didn't have the interaction pieces, right? Without the Hexsplit, Sunburst, Celestial Impact, whatever they needed, right? They weren't able to deal with our threats, right? And that's the way that Acquiescence was trying to beat that deck, right? It was always through pressure. It was always through the fact that they can't interact with the stuff that we need to play, and that's how we're going to win. And that's like a pretty stock standard version of that. We didn't play the Pantheon, and we had 2 Varus draws, which is like irregular, but the gameplay pattern was the same, even if the specifics was a bit different because it was triple Varus, no Pantheon, as opposed to 1 Varus, 1 Pantheon, or 1 Varus, 2 Pantheon, which is more prototypical, right? Let's move on. Okay, so Acquiescence is gone, so now I'm supposed to play Red Wing, is my understanding. Still think I'm going to get OD'd. I think they're going to play Yasuo and Nivea, and I'm going to realize that I should have banned Renekton and Caitlyn. Which I did ban. Spidz here in the past means to say that I shouldn't have banned Renekton and Caitlyn, and I should have banned Yasuo and Nivea. Whatever. Yeah, here's Yasuo and Nivea, which I've never fought. I've fought, like, Hecarim and Nivea, but I've not fought Yasuo and Nivea. Do I need Quiet? Quiet kills Greenglade Lookout, which is actually kind of good, but I think it's not... Is it? It also kills Ice Veil Archer and Weirding Stones. And Avarician Sentry. I think it's worth keeping. It's good enough. So, I really like this Quietus kit. Now, Quietus doesn't typically make sense against, like, a Nivea control, but they're on so much Greenglade Duo, Greenglade Lookout, and Weirding Stones, and even the Ice Veil Archer, that this is just a worthwhile keep. It will trade positively with something, and it'll give me a good tempo play early, right? No matter what, 8 of their cards let me have this be a good tempo play early, and push comes to shove, it kills an egg, right? Like, that's not going to be the worst thing to feel in the world. But when I'm thinking about, like, I want to apply as much pressure as possible, part of that is saying, let me access high tempo plays, and part of that is saying, Quietus will give me a +1 mana investment, which is very similar to saying a high tempo play for a deck like Red Gwen, where a +1 mana investment means something like a developed Pigeon that wasn't going to be developed otherwise, right? Or you know, the pigeon would have traded into the thing, which is slightly worse than killing it outright and keeping our units alive, right? So I really like keeping the quietest here. Darius is too expensive, doesn't need to be pulled. I need to have something else at the moment. Foya gives me the late game when we're talking about the stuff back in the slideshow. The Foya is really important, and pigeons are one drop. Besides that, the hand is a little weird, but I think this is fine. I am in love with this hand. I love Gwen. I've added Foya to this deck. I never liked Foya in Red Gwen, and I never played Green Katarina. I refused to play that deck, but I've added Foya because, unfortunately, it's just unfortunate. It's the correct choice. Look out. I am going to quietest look out. I don't want you to have Green Glade look out. I don't want you to cheapen any video. And then I'll play Foya and Gwen, and I'll feel pretty happy about my life. Foya. For what it's worth, I think there are arguments in the world to make where you're not supposed to quietest there, you're supposed to quietest weirding stones, right? I don't think that's an awful argument. I think that if they attack with Green Glade Lookout, I can't block it just because that's like a pretty good like freeze for them. Or they're getting a positive trade and they're giving a unit around. And then they're also cheapening their Anivia or whatever. So I wanted to kill that quicker, right? Like Anivia isn't like the worst thing for us to see, but like them developing Anivia on turn 5 as opposed to like our turn 6 open is very, very different, right? Like now they're developing a unit that will probably trade into something, will then attack next turn, deal 1 to everything, presumably die, can block another turn, right? Like delaying all of that by 1 turn is quite powerful to me, which is why I wanted to get rid of the thing that could make that cost 5 mana. But yeah, I mean, if they had weirding here, now all of a sudden we're facing 5 mana anyway, right? Big win. Avalanche doesn't concern me, Concussive Palm doesn't really concern me because I like Ghastly Band. Feeling pretty good. Momentum's high. I always say feeling good momentum's high. It's based on a Northern Lion bit that I quite like. It's not a bit, it's just something he says in the Dry Baby video. That I think is really funny. Yep, I'll just attack with Ghastly Band then. Sorry, I tried to attack one of the opponent. So, I want to explain like the Gwen play, because if I wanted, I could open attack and then push more damage, and then yay. I have to get these concussives out of them eventually. There's a lot of instances where developing is my better play, right? I will find that in the future, with Red Gwen, sometimes opening's the right play, sometimes developing's the right play, and getting out the Concussive Palm now, I think is pretty decent for me, because they can't kill the Gwen. Like, the Gwen will stay on the board. But now we've gotten rid of one of their Concussive Palms, which is one of their best pieces of interaction, right? Like, Concussive Palm is... You know, everyone talks about Ionia as the deny region, but as someone that plays nothing but mid-range and tempo, like, it's also basically the Concussive Palm region, right? And so I really like getting this out of them now so that we can pressure more later, right? I think that's like a pretty good play to play this Gwen. Yeah. In future, I will refuse. I also just remembered what happens to this Gwen, and I'm going to sound like an idiot, but whatever. When the opponent has spell in the stack. I will learn from my lessons, from my failures. I will play Fallen Reckoner if they tap onto Avalanche. If not, it might just be Ruin. Yeah, sorry, they didn't tap onto Avalanche. I think the correct play is Ruin Draconer into attacking on Gwen, into playing Rearguard. I think that's the right play. Gwen does a lot of damage. Yeah, sure, whatever. And I'm hoping that they force themselves to play something like a Steel Tempest so that I can play Rearguard. It's a bit of a big ask. If not, I'll just attack. So at this point, my only thought is that they could have Steel Tempest or Concussive Palm. I didn't think about Flash Freeze at all. That's just like my bad. I remember what happens. They play Flash Freeze. Obviously they play Flash Freeze here. You could see this coming from like a mile away. It's very, very clear this is Flash Freeze time. Like, if you go to the dollar store and you're like, hi, show me your Ionia and Freljord section, and they take you to the Ionia Freljord section, and you're looking through all the things you could buy. Like, very clearly, if you're Ellzawn, you're like, I want to buy Three Sisters things, because it's going to be really good in this position, right? Obviously, right? In retrospect, I think the best play here is to... It might still be to play the Reckoner, but to actually rally on the Rearguard, right? If they lose a freeze here, that's phenomenal. Or Rearguard gets in for 4, or it trades into something. All of those is amazing. Then the correct play here is to play Rearguard and do the free attack with the Rearguard. Alternatively, you can justify the Can't Block Reckoner. I don't think the Can't Block Reckoner is a bad choice here. I do get a little bit concerned about the Avalanche possibilities. Right now, they're killing 2 of my units, and then my next turn becomes a little bit awkward. I don't really want to open. It's not the strongest open I could do. I could play the second Can't Block Reckoner, but then they can do another Avalanche kill the Gwen. At that point, like, at least both of their things can't block, but I've also got no units, which means they can start pressuring me, and I have to think about that a little. At that point, also, I've only got 2 units. One's Ephemeral that's already dying, and one can't block. So if they do have a double Avalanche, right, like, I don't want to be in a position where they want to Avalanche this turn and then Avalanche on my development next turn. I'd rather it be, like, a little bit more awkward for them. Like, they do one Avalanche, and then I attack, and then they do another Avalanche, and then I've got things going on. So... TLDR, I don't think that playing the Can't Block Reckoner is necessarily a correct play. It's not a bad play. I think it's like our second best option, primarily because we really only have 2 options. But I think if we were to do the free attack Reckoner line, I think a better line would be to do it on the Rearguard, because I think either option that they could do in response to the Rearguard is pretty good for me.
I'll just pass, I mean. They could have a freeze. I guess if they had flash freeze, this wasn't worth it. Oh, look, flash freeze. Spidz, you got punished. How could this have ever happened? God damn it. Why did I do this? Yeah, that was very stupid. Alright, fair call. Let's glimpse. Glimpse is pretty logical. I don't really need anything else with my mana. Fervor's only going to be pretty much used to the face unless there's like a very specific tempo play, so mana may as well just be spent on Glimpse. That's my bad. I should have done it on Ruined Dragon earlier, I guess. We have Darius and friends. If I play Darius, what's the punish? William of Ionia? Oh, now things have changed.
Yeah, so Shunpo changes things because the idea of open attacking prevents me from doing anything for 2 turns is no longer like a true statement, right? That's why Shunpo was in the deck, so that I can justify open attacking and I can find tempo points, right? Like Shunpo lets me access tempo points as opposed to needing to develop into tempo points, right? So Shunpo changes things. It means I think I end up opening here because of Shunpo. If not, I probably would have ended up playing Darius and said, okay, play William, play Hoko, play something, and then still attacked anyway. That probably would have been my line. Probably not, actually. I probably would have developed Can't Block this guy. What is it? Boisterous Host. And then would have done Can't Block Reckoner afterwards. I think that probably would have been my line. If not, but let's play anyway, Shunpo. Anyway, in case they have, like, Deny or something. Am I supposed to attack like this? I think I'm supposed to attack like this. Now that I've got Shunpo, like, the world has changed. I can now attack on my defensive tokens. Like, everything has changed about the world now. Now I can, like, play Darius here and continually threaten Shunpo and feel really happy about myself. I think. Feel understandable. I don't feel great. I feel like this is like still a bad position to be in. I feel like I fucked up quite a bit. But what I'll also do is just like develop wide. Yeah. So I'm gonna play. So now that they've got no units, this is a perfect time for Fallen Reckoner, right? Like this is when Fallen Reckoner is good. If you've ever been confused about this card, like this is the position, right? One of their main cards that they want to use as like a really important thing, one that costs 5 mana, has been totally neutralized, right? In addition, like, this is something that'll trade up because it's got the 4 strength, right? It can trade pretty well into things. And, like, they have to be constantly developing blockers or dealing with our stuff because they don't have any blockers of their own, right? What this says is 100% of your blockers are gone, which is a very different statement from 1 less blocker, is there, right? In a board of 6 blockers, giving one thing can't block doesn't really matter. But in a board of 1 blocker, giving it can't block means they are forced to deal with every single unit in a different sort of way, right? As opposed to regular LOR, which they can, you know, choose where they want to block, right? If one of the main things that this game does is give advantage to blockers, right? This is one of the main ways to remove that advantage if they've only got 1 or 2 blockers. This is why I really like Fallen Reckoner in these positions, right? I'm gonna play Fallen Reckoner. Okay. On the also is. And I think I'll play Boisterous Host. I know, it gives them like decent avalanches. I think I'm okay with that. If they play Anivia here, I'm gonna respond with like Dances, I think. Yeah, the only thing they could do is Hoko, like after Anivia attacks. Which I'm not too concerned about, I don't think. So let's evaluate our hand for a second, because our hand is starting to get into some of the issues I was explaining during the VOD review section, which is that we've got a bunch of 6-drops. And against an Ionia deck specifically, like what they do really, really well, Ionia, is spend 4 mana to make you spend 6 more mana, right? And they get these little mana investments that allow them to commit into things, such as Karma, such as Anivia, etc., right? So I play 6 mana, they play 4 mana, they remove my tempo, and get to continue doing whatever they're doing on the board right now, which currently is Yasuo and Anivia, right? So with my hand being all these 6-drops, it's kind of difficult. This is in comparison to SI that needs to spend 6 mana but actually kills them, right? So I will have the late game advantage because they're just recalling it. But that is offset by the fact that Ellzawn has late game advantage through Anivia, right? So the negatives of Ionia, which is that I technically get late game advantage if they don't have a win condition, is offset by the fact that they do have a win condition. Turn 10, Anivia starts striking, right? So they can afford to just get these small mana investments that give me card advantage in order to afford that, right? Anyway, I play Dances because I think that even if they do a recall here, one, I'm getting it out of them. If it's in their hand, it's in their hand. I have to get rid of it eventually, right? I can't just, like, not say things are in their hand. And their deck is a sort of deck that is willing to keep these cards in hand and always have 4 mana up, so I need to just get rid of these as soon as possible. So playing Dances, perfectly redeemable here. I think it's fine, and I think it's better than Darius, because I think Gwen is typically better than Darius, especially because they need to pre-commit a stun, or else they get to summon the Gwen. But with Darius, they can just stun whenever they want, including during combat, which turns on Steel Tempest Mark. It's like a little concerning. I don't know, I think I've already fucked up by attacking with Gwen. That is true, you did fuck up by attacking with Gwen. Should have played the rear guard.
Okay. Do they run William? They do run William. Okay, they hit William. Okay, cool. Then they attack me. Yeah. I don't know if am I supposed to sacrifice Fallen Reckoner? I could sacrifice Fallen Reckoner. I don't think that's actually too bad. I replay Reckoner. I'm misplaying. I'm irritated at myself because I've not played this game properly at all. So, what's the logic of blocking with Reckoner? We get to apply can't block again. Remember that statement I said a little bit ago about if they've only got one block and removing it's a lot better? I now can do that. The only issue is that, like, what is my turn looking like? Because can't block Reckoner, the second one costs 3 mana. I can only afford can't block Reckoner and a 1-drop. I can't afford any of the 6-drops. So what I'd rather do is develop a 6-drop. What are they going to do? They can't afford Buried in Ice because they're not fucking even running Buried in Ice, but they can't afford it even if they could. Right, what are they going to do? Harsh Winds? Like, we can develop them more anyway, and while Anivia will probably block something, I think it's better off developing one of the 6-drops, even if they've got another 4-mana card, that like an Ionian 4-mana card. They have to have that anyway, right? They're going to play that whenever they play it, right? So we may as well get all of those out as time goes on and pressure them before, like, Anivia on turn 12 or 14 starts beating us. Or I guess with their attack tokens 11 and 13, right? That's when Anivia is going to start beating us down. And so we need to get rid of all their recalls so that when they're on those sorts of turns, we're playing our Dancers and our Dariuses and trying to pog up, right? So we just need to get rid of those earlier because, as I said, we're still going to outvalue them. And while Anivia sort of says win the game, she doesn't really say win the game, right? I'm confused about what my best line of, like, course of action is. I think I'm passing her. I don't think I'm playing great card. I think I'm going to replay Dancers. And I'm going to see what they do in response. Dawn and Dusk? Okay. Well, here is Flock. Doing a Flock here because it's unlikely that Flock will ever be procced in other situations. Flock is not a card that does really well into this matchup, so the fact that we have Flock here is quite nice, as opposed to Fervor, which can hit the face. Do they run Note? They run 1 Note. Okay. They denied it though. Beautiful. So deny is much bigger because now Shunpo is more likely to get through. I think they're on 2 denies from memory. So now Shunpo is more likely to get through. In addition, it means that they probably don't have Note because I think they would have noped here, which means we can probably get Fervor more likely. They've only got 2 denies left, but that means like Shunpo is back in action. I'm also going to play Rhaegar, and I'm going to put Reckoner first, I think. Does this force him to block? It does. Why not do it this way? I want to mention one thing. We didn't play Rearguard last time because I wanted to keep up stuff, just like have extra mana just for fun. Right, just in case something gets drawn. It can be nice to have the extra mana, and because we're playing Dancers next turn, the only reason not to play Rearguard last turn is if we draw a 2-drop, right? Because if we draw a 2-drop, then instead of playing Rearguard, we might wanted to have played the Fearsome guy or the 2 mana that summons another person, but that's the only punish, and it's not that much of a punish, right? Like, it's slightly less damage, it's slightly less interesting, but I think it's better to have the opportunity of drawing something like a Glimpse, draw something like a Vile Feast, draw something like, you know, even like a Quietus in some position. Oh, we don't have Quietus, sorry. I don't know, maybe a Pirouette or something, right? Like, having the access to extra mana is fine. Like, it's good to have access to mana in general. But that's the only thing to think about, right? Like, if we're guaranteedly playing a 6-mana card this turn, the only difference between playing Rearguard last turn and this turn is either actions, which against their deck actions isn't too important. Their things are super expensive. And the speed at which they play them, there's either only one slow speed they'll want to play at a time or everything's fast or burst, right? So the actions doesn't really matter, or the 2-mana investment after, and because we have 8 unit mana, we spend 6. The only things that Rearguard changes is either actions-based things or the 2 mana as opposed to the 1 mana, right? Okay. I just wanted to explain why I didn't play Rearguard last turn and why I ended up playing it this turn. I think this is fine. Go this way. Now, if they ever tap under Deny, we have Shunpo, which I think is strong. Cool. I think I've misplayed this a fair bit, but so all of a sudden, we've got a lot more damage on the Nexus just because they can't really do that much, right? Like, we're feeling really strong, and that's what our deck's supposed to do. Like, right, this Foya has added a bunch of damage, right? All of that overwhelm damage was pretty much due to Foya, and then also, like, these 2-1s that have kept hitting them. There was that 3-1 that hit them ages ago, right? This Foya has added up to a lot, and this was 3 mana. Like, if you want to go back through this game and see what Foya has done, and add up all the little bits that Foya came into part, Foya was a really good keep in the mulligan. That interaction there with the Shen, what's his name? Yasuo? Yasuo was pretty good for me. I think Gwen is nice. Tap under Deny. Yeah. Be that guy. Yeah. This is a tough turn for them. Yasuo is flipped. Am I getting concerned? Hold on. Steel Tempest. Incussive. Might not be the best for me. I could play Gwen, but if they stun Gwen, I'm in like a super weird position. I wonder if I'm supposed to Shunpo now. If they deny, then I do Gwen. And feel like okay about life. Or am I just supposed to play Gwen? If they stun Gwen, then what? What am I doing? Like, I could do Eternal Dancers, I could do Darius. It's so weird that everything is expensive in my hand. I just need to deal 2 damage. So you know what? Let's do Shunpo. They deny Shunpo, I play Gwen, I open, and then I've got... Okay, I think Shunpo's great.
So let's talk about what's happened here, because all of a sudden, everything has changed, right? No longer is the biggest fear card that they could have denied to beat the Shunpo. The biggest fear card they could have is a stun, because Yasuo will kill Gwen. Now, if we look at their 5 health, we only ever need to deal 2 damage, right? 2 damage is all that we need, right? Because we've got the Fervor, right? And Fervor, we can justifiably get through, right? Maybe not immediately, but the point is that at some point, they're going to commit mana. At some point, we're going to be pressuring them to the point where they need to play Harsh Winds and Concussive and go below 2 mana, and then we play Fervor, right? Getting them into the 3 health range means that every bit of pressure we apply is no longer pressure trying to go for lethal, it's pressure trying to get them to die to Fervor, right? Which is a different form of pressure. So, now that the worst thing that they could do is have a stun, I want them to tap under stuns. And if I want them to tap under stuns, I want to play Shunpo. Because Shunpo, if they deny Shunpo, I play Gwen, I open, she does 2 damage. We're going to probably deal a little bit more because we've got the Rearguard and the Reckoner, and the Foyer unit, so they're going to have to commit a little bit of mana, but the point is that once that 2 damage is on, once their health is getting lower, we've got Fervor, and we can basically win the game much, much, much more reliably. So, now we're doing Shunpo, even though they still have deny mana, because all of a sudden, the scariest thing they could do is have Concussive Palm, not deny. Deny Shunpo, I'm happier than if they kill Gwen, I think. Okay. So this is the right play for them. It's surprisingly so, but this is what they're supposed to do. Even if they've got the... If they've got Deny and Concussive, I think this is the better play. Okay, I think I'm still playing Gwen. But if they've got Concussive, this gets really scary. Or I could just play Risen Reckoner. Hold on. Yeah, I'll play Risen Reckoner. That's better than... Because if they're Concussive, like, I get still attacked. Never mind, I might have been wrong. I forgot that we had Risen Reckoner. And I forgot this is how the lethal ended up coming about. So this is better. And they were forked, right? If they played Deny, we play Gwen and we win. Right? If they don't play Deny, which is what happened, we play Risen Reckoner and win. Their best play here, I think, may have been a pre-committal Ice Veil Archer. So that they can develop a unit and so that Yasuo can block as opposed to the 3-1. But if they play Ice Veil Archer, I just play Gwen. So I guess I have guaranteed lethal when I play Shunpo. Right, when I play Shunpo, no matter what they do, I guess we have guaranteed lethal. Just because, like, no matter what they do here, like, we're going to feel very, very comfy. If they've got Ice Veil Archer plus Steel Tempest, the thing is, like, we're still going to deal that 2 damage, either through, like, attacking them or through the Gwen or whatever, right? I think that's better than Gwen here. But yeah, the Can't Block Reckoner is better than Gwen, and I probably should have considered that in my evaluations, right? When I was talking about the Shunpo thing, right? It's not just because of Gwen, it's also because of this, right? It is forking Steel Tempest, Flash Freeze, Concussive. Okay, technically Avalanche. I forgot about Avalanche in this instance. Ice Veil Archer, sure. If they have Avalanche... Gwen is better if they've got Avalanche, isn't it? Right? Because if they've got Avalanche, what's happened is that they play Avalanche, Gwen is lethal, whatever, right? Because they're forced to block with Yasuo and we hit this. And if they've got Avalanche here, all of a sudden I can't hurt them easily. I'm playing Gwen next turn, they have stun next turn, I lose. So if I wanted to beat Avalanche, I probably should have played Gwen. And, like, let's say that they don't have Avalanche, but they do have the Concussive, right? Like, the thing I was most fearful of was Concussive. We trade into... I guess we attack and we lose. So it's interesting. We're either playing around Concussive or Avalanche. Right? If they've got Concussive, we lose our Gwen that we would be developing. Right? Oh, wow. This is weird. We've got a lot of options, right? So, in this position... Let me go back like a half a second before I play Can't Block Reckoner. Right? In this position, there are so many things... They attack us, I think. But in this position, there are so many things we can play around, right? Can't Block Reckoner loses to Avalanche, but beats pretty much everything else, right? It beats Concussive because of the way the Can't Block thing works. We're going to deal 2 damage or 3 damage minimum. Then we've got the Fervor, etc., right? And once I'm saying for lethal is just get them into 3 HP, right? Once you're at 3 HP, that's pretty much the same as saying lethal, right? It's not very technically, but I'm going to use that as saying lethal, right? So, They play concussive. Sorry, we play this, they play Avalanche, we lose, right? Any other card, Steel Tempest, Ice Veil Archer, whatever, we win, right? We play Gwen. We don't lose to... We beat everything that isn't Concussive Palm, or William, or Hoko, right? I think they're on 2 Avalanches by this point. Maybe it's 3. I'm going to double check the deck list because I think this is an important point to make. Okay, yeah, so they're on 2 Avalanches, right? So the ways that we lose is either 2 Avalanche, or one of their 2 last Concussive Palms, one of their 2 last Homecomings. I guess it's just 1 last Homecoming. It's 1 last Homecoming, 2 last Concussive Palms, right? So it's 3 cards for the Gwen that loses, and it's 2 cards for the Reckoner that loses, right? So mathematically, Reckoner is better, right? It's not bad to do the Gwen in as much as, like, even if they do the concussive, right, we're fine. And I guess, like, if they're doing a Hoko, we still win, right? So it is just concussive. So it's 2 concussive or 2 Avalanche, right? That's what I know I've spent a lot of time on this point. It's 2 concussive, 2 Avalanche. I can either play around Avalanche or concussive. I guess I should probably pick... Okay, let's think about this even further, right? So, 2 worlds. Avalanche or concussive. These are the only worlds in which we don't win, right? Either play, we don't win, right? Avalanche in the Reckoner world means that they're at 5 HP, and next turn we're playing Gwen. They would have to stun Gwen immediately, and then we play Dancers, right? They would have to have 2 stuns. That's it, right? They just have to have 2 stuns, right? They must have 2 stuns, though. They can't do anything else. They have to have 2 stuns. So in the event that they have Avalanche, they'd also have to have 2 stuns afterwards the turn after. But it can be noted that they have to be slow speed stuns, right? But by stuns here, I also mean Homecoming, though. If we do Gwen, the turn, and they have the Concussive Palm, the turn after that, we do Can't Block Reckoner, then they Avalanche, and then we're basically losing. Well, they'd have to have 2 stuns again, right? Because they'd have to kill the Dancers somehow. So what the Dancers says in hand is that next turn, they will need another stun, right? That's what Dancers says in hand. So, by doing that, we are forcing them to have 2 stuns. Either way. But I guess I'm spending a lot of time on this. I haven't thought about this that hard during the game, which is why I'm putting a lot of time on it now. But I guess a different way to frame it is that over the next 2 turns, they need to have Avalanche and 2 stuns, right? That is necessary, right? They can't do anything else, right? They could, I guess, if I play Gwen, stun Gwen, then I do Can't Block Reckoner, and then they only freeze Can't Block Reckoner, or block it with like Yasuo, because in this world I'm only stopping the Concussive Palm, and then they're stunning the Dancers. And so in that world, in the world where they decide to freeze the Can't Block Reckoner, in the world where they don't have 2 stuns, but they've got stun, harsh winds, in that very, very, very specific world, makes Reckoner better this turn rather than next turn, because at least next turn Harsh Winds is active, but this turn Harsh Winds isn't active, right? If they Harsh Winds this turn, we're winning, right? Like, we win if they have Harsh Winds this turn. So, fundamentally, I think Can't Block Reckoner is better. Not for the reasons I stated in the video, but because I think that and I'm probably wrong here because there's so much in the brain and not on the field that I don't know if I'm keeping track of all this correctly. But if my logic is correct, based on their deck list, for them to not lose next turn, and lose means be under 3 HP, or be at 3 HP, they need to have 2 stuns, and then either Avalanche or Harsh Winds. And they can't win with the Avalanche, they can't win with the Harsh Winds version of that hand if I do Can't Block Reckoner this turn. Thank you for listening to Spidz YouTube. Let's finish the video. That's the mute button. I think Can't Block Reckoner this turn is correct. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But if they've got Concussive, this gets really scary. Or I could just play Risen Reckoner. Hold on. Yeah, I'll play Risen Reckoner. That's better than... Because if they Concussive, like, I get Steel Attack. I think that's better than Gwen, yeah. The only fear cards they had are Steel Tempest, Flash Freeze, Concussive. Okay, technically Avalanche. I forgot about Avalanche in this instance. Ice Veil Archer, sure. Well, I'll attack like this. No, I'll attack like this. Yeah, that's much better. Okay.
Steel Tempest? Flash Freeze. Okay. All of that is okay by me. I've done 2 damage. Now I can start doing Gwen and Eternal Dances and threatening Noxian Fervor. Perfect. Just anything needs to hit, I'm happy. Whew. I don't think I played this game properly at all. But
Right, so I've been saying this, like, less than 2 HP is, like, lethal. Just a reminder, right? Like, the point is that I now need to pressure them to the point where they tap under Notify, right? Or I win through this other pressure stuff, right? Getting them down to 2 HP is just a goal in the brain, only because in the event that they've got all of these interaction pieces, like, if their hand is perfect, I'm getting rid of perfection until Fervor wins, right? That's the logic I'm going for right now.
I think the fact that I can just keep developing, I don't know what they're going to be able to do. We should be able to win.
But like, as we said, during the slides, like, pressure to win, right?
Dawn and Death. An idiot. Alright, I mean, I could just open with Gwen. They don't have any healing in the deck, so I can just attack with Gwen and win. I don't want to, like, waste that time. I think. So, sure. Yeah, I was still win. I still win. Good games. I was recording, right? Let's go! I didn't forget. Okay. I'm glad I won. I'm glad it was a 2-0 win, finally. That's my first 2-0 win. I've only ever 2-1 or 1-2. So getting a 2-0 is finally nice. I can finally, you know, get 3 points. And that puts me in a much better position. Like, now that I've got so many more points on the thing, if I quickly check what the scores are like, I am now 4th. Yeah, I'm now 4th. I'm just 1 point below Icado, but I'm 2 points above Capitao in tempo. So, like, I'm much more comfy, right? Which is great. I feel really bad for Ellzawn, who has lost 5. I'm sorry, Ellzawn. But GG's. Can I send a good game? Good games. I'm gonna stop recording for My Life is Meaningless. Goodbye.
Okay, and with that, my life is meaningless, and goodbye.